All right. There he is. Okay, just putting Malcolm in. Hi, Sally. Hey, there he is.
Hi, Captain. How are you?
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm well. Let me move the camera down a little bit. I'm well. Yeah, it's nice and sunny here today. Thank goodness.
Not here.
Yeah. What's the weather like in New York?
It's pretty rainy and cold right now.
Yeah, how cold?
I haven't been outside, so I can't tell you.
Okay, well, that's good. Good answer. Well, I'm so happy to catch up with you today. I mean, we have, on the thinking of our call today, we have Malcolm James Kutner, who's joining us from New York City, and he has been on lockdown as of how many weeks now?
I guess it's like 5 or 6. I don't know. What day is it?
A long time. Yeah. April 21st. So, yeah, it's been almost 6 weeks for me here in LA.
6 weeks, yeah. I think we went into quarantine about the same time because I had just gotten back from LA when I saw you out there. And, here we are.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. Thank you for doing this today.
Well, listen, I thank you for all you're doing. I think it's more important than ever to talk about the way art and design can fuel creativity and comfort and camaraderie and collaboration. And I really appreciate and admire everything that you've been doing. It's really inspiring to see. And thank you so much for having me be a part of it.
No, it's very sweet. Thank you. No, it's my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. So let's jump into like the energy the energy of art, right? As a designer, as a writer, as a world traveler, talk about how the energy really shifts a space. I notice it from my perspective. I'm curious in your thoughts there.
Well, I love that you're going to start with energy talk.
We need energy, all of us.
We do. And I think a lot of it is about the energy that we put out there. But the energy that we put out, I'm a big believer, it comes from within. So what I do in my own mind, in my own heart, in my own space is crucial to the energy that I'm going to take outside my door into the world, which is now happening on a screen for the most part. What I think a lot about, and some people saw the Instagram stories, you inspired me to really think about art and think about these questions that you and I came up with. I think a lot about the relationships between things, and not just between art and design or, all of that sort of stuff, but also the way that we put things together, whether it's the personal and the professional, the sort of internal and the external, or a drawing by an artist with a personal photograph, or a painting next to a souvenir that we picked up along the way, whether it was in a great antique shop or in the airport souvenir shop, which is one of my favorite stories about Yves Saint Laurent, who was such an amazing collector. And one of his favorite things of his entire extensive collection was this little bull that he bought in Spain at an airport gift shop after seeing the bull races. So I think it's about how you infuse, what you bring into your house or into your personal space, and how you pair it with something that is, uniquely personal and specific to you, your own story. And then, that's a little tablescape. It's a gallery wall. It's a moment on a bookshelf that I might be the only one who sees it. And I put some of those moments up last night. I put some of that stuff on Instagram every now and then. It's like little studies about, oh, these are the things that are important to me. And you can only convey so much of why. But so when it comes to energy, in my work as a designer and as a writer, I think very carefully that everything that comes into a space, whether it's a physical space, a room I'm putting together, or a mental space, every component, every ingredient comes with a frequency. What is that frequency? Who made it? Where was it made? How was it made? Whose hands touched it? Who created it? Because we're inviting that energy to be a part of our space. And I've always, with my clients, I'm very lucky to have clients who appreciate and value that, because I've done a lot of due diligence figuring out where stuff comes from. And I take it really seriously. But then there's something about it when you walk into a room, you can just feel it. And you can't identify, it's that pillow over there, or it's that lampshade, or it's that carpet. It's everything together. And I think that's what energy is. And
I think to your point, you know, if you pick up something, whether it's at the airport or on the street during your travels or whatever, I mean, I know for me, for example, it's making me really rethink that, because a lot of those things I'll kind of hide, or I'll put in my bedroom, or I'll put like in areas of the home that I sometimes won't necessarily want other people to see. And I think to your point is living with all of those and having the juxtaposition between those good memorable pieces, whether they be art or little artifacts or whatever, and creating that juxtaposition within your normal living space.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's a lot of it. It's a consciousness. It's about how you set an intention, whether it's just setting a table for yourself during quarantine, or you know, how you pick something up like a tape measure and place it down. You know, it's attention, it's presence, and trying to carry that through in all the things that we do, which none of us can do all the time, but we try.
Yeah. How have you changed during quarantine? I mean, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I mean, it's a loaded question, but.
I mean, look, I think, how have I changed during quarantine? I don't know, but I do keep a journal. I've always kept a journal. I write a lot of stuff all the time. I think, and I spend a lot of my time alone anyway. People who know me, I'm a little bit of an introvert. I'm pretty reflective and introspective most of the time.
Me too.
So there is a part of this quarantine. It's sort of like, oh, I get to just do all the things that I normally like to do with zero pressure to
see other people.
Yeah. But I do miss people. I miss my friends a great deal. And, you know, it's really nice to have a hug. I mean, simple things like that.
I'm giving you a hug. Giving you a hug right now.
Thank you. A hug back to everybody.
Virtual hug.
So I think how I've changed, you know, I'm getting more in touch with what's really important to me, which I did a lot. A lot of people know I took this trip. You know, I was able to take a little break and take a trip that I'd always wanted to take. And
Where'd you go?
I was in India, Bhutan, Nepal, and Thailand. And I was gone for almost 3 months.
Amazing.
But that wasn't like a go find yourself trip.
That was last year, right?
That was last year, the end of last year. I think that what I've been doing is just getting more in touch than ever with what's really important to me. Who are, you know, it's like all these things of quarantine. Be careful who you touch, who you associate with, where you go, how you interact. I think these are things to think about more carefully than ever. And that's kind of what I've been doing. What's really important to me? Where do I want to invest the time? Where do I want to invest the energy? What's my intention? You know, I wake up every morning, I make the bed. I heard once there are 6 words for people who work at home, and it's get dressed and make your bed.
I make my bed every day too.
You know, I try and do that every day. I don't always do it though.
Yeah.
But so how I've changed, I don't know. And I think that a lot of what we have to remember is we don't know how we're changing in the present moment until that present moment is in retrospect. So the best thing I have found to do is to just pay attention to what's going on and to learn how to be with myself, my thoughts, my feelings, my reactions to things, and to be really gentle with that and to be really kind, because we're our own worst critics. Especially, well, not especially, I think it's a human condition, but I live a lot of my life with people in the design and art world, and there's a high level of sensitivity there. So self-compassion, kindness, I think, is something I've really gotten in touch with on this. It's like, if I don't feel like waking up until a little bit later, fine. And learning to just honor whatever comes up. And it's not all pleasant. You know, I'm not somebody, I have not become a master chef during quarantine. I haven't learned a new language. I haven't made a short film or finished a book or any of that stuff. You know, so we'll see. Ask me in 6 months.
Right. But you're more loving and more kind to yourself, and I think that's beautiful. You're learning. We're all in this time of quarantine and isolation, having a chance to really get to know ourselves in a different way. We're forced to, in ways. Those of us that are alone, especially.
Yeah, and I think thinking about art, I mean, this is a huge thing that art brings to the world, is, you know, expression and a mapping of thought processes and feelings and responses to different things. And a lot of, you know, for me personally, the artwork that I collect, a lot of it, I'm fortunate enough, I know whose hands have made it. I know what period of their life it came out of, what it was a response to. So there's a whole story behind it, apart from being an evocative visual image to look at.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I love about art and design, which I put together. I really do put them together.
So talk about that. Talk about the relationship between art and design. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, design is, you know, the carpets and the color schemes, and art is a physical object. But talk about like the connection between those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more a conversation about the difference maybe between design and decoration. But
Okay.
all of these words, first of all, design is problem solving. That's the first thing I learned the first week of design school. It's problem solving with an aesthetic and functional goal in mind. And if the aesthetics doesn't work and the function doesn't, it's not successful design. And vice versa. If the function works and it's not aesthetically pleasing to the people who are living there, because it's a really relative thing, then it's not successful design. And I think art gets at that in a different way, because art is working, a lot of it is working things out on a piece of paper with a sculpture, with a hammer, you know, with a thread. I'm a big believer, like textile arts are a huge passion of mine. So I think that art and design go hand in hand, and it's a long conversation. You know, I credit my dear friend Laura Kaufman, who I've known since high school and who's an amazing artist. And we're very close, and she put a term in my mind when I was, I think, in college, and it was visual literacy. And we've had this conversation about art and design and the dialogue and the tension between them since we've known each other. And it's a conversation that comes up a lot with a lot of my friends. I think they go hand in hand for me. You know, to live in a designed environment that's thought out, that's considered, that's intentionally created, and then layering it in with pieces of artwork that tell stories. You know, that's how I see what I do. I tell a story with a space.
You love telling stories.
And artwork is a crucial character in that story.
We love your stories.
Thanks. It could be the weaver of a carpet. It could be, you know, a painting on the wall, a decorative painter. A good friend of mine, Dean Barger, is a decorative painter who's an amazingly trained fine artist working in the decorative arts. So it's all there, and I think it's some of it goes back to energy and how the lens that you put on as you look at these things and as you put them together.
Right. Laura's actually on the call. I see that. And if you guys have any questions,
I haven't seen his on here.
Yeah, if you guys have questions, please pop those up. So jump into a story. So tell us an interesting story of your travels last year. You were what? India, Nepal, Burma. Where else?
No, last year was India. It was India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Thailand. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, so first of all, I organized that trip. It was not a sort of, oh, let's go and just hang out and sightsee. I did some of that, but I really designed a syllabus for myself, and I wanted to look at the way different people make things. So I spent a lot of time looking at textiles, painting, sculpture, some of it really old and architectural, and some of it new. And I really was able to kind of dive deep into, I think, the way people make things and people who are making things with their hands. It's so important. It's more important than ever. I put up this morning a little story, this drawing I have by Amitabha of a hand with my own hands reflected in a picture frame. And I just think that the touch of the hand is so important. So I went around, and I mean, I was able to meet these amazing artists and weavers and antique textile dealers and acquire some things, which I can show you some of those.
Yeah, can you show us?
Yeah, sure.
Show us some of those while you're talking.
Favorite things. I'll just show you some of these textiles that were some of my favorites. These are
I loved all your photos when you were on that journey, by the way.
Thank you. This is, you know, these are just...
Where's that from?
This is from India, from probably, it's called Banjara. It's probably from Gujarat. But, you know, the intricacy of the weaving with the shells, it's just this, I feel like this is like a little painting.
It is.
You know, then there's...
what energy, how does that make you feel whenever you see that piece?
Happy. It makes me feel
happy. Okay.
I
want to see you smile. I like your smile.
Which is, you know, you can see, I don't know if you guys can see, but you know, all of this is sort of done by hand.
Where is that one from?
This one is Bengali. Kanta is from Bengal.
Amazing.
I have some amazing antique pieces that I acquired that were woven in cashmere. So if you look at this is like this beautiful piece.
Like a mini rug.
Yeah, but I don't know if this is going to show up, but on the back, that's all done by hand.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Maybe pull it out just slightly. Yeah, there. It was blurred. Okay, that's cool.
So
beautiful. Great colors.
Thanks.
We have a question. Laura says, how does time change your relationship with collected objects?
How does time change my relationship with collective objects? Thanks, Laura.
We wanted to surprise you.
Yeah, no, it's good. One of the things I love most during this time is connecting with these friends of mine like this, and these are the conversations that we get to have. Yeah. And I feel so lucky about that because it is important. I think, time, it's such an interesting lens. How does it change your relationship with collected objects? Well, the funny thing, I think that what comes to me sort of intuitively is time has taught me to be less attached to them. Okay. I view more than ever right now, I feel like, with this, all I get to do is take care of it right now. I found it. I loved it. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. It's in my life. It's beautiful. But I had this actually, goes back to your question, how have I changed during quarantine? It hit me about the second or third week on. I just moved into this new apartment when I got back. And I have all my books, and I have some artwork. I didn't get it all here, and I have some furniture. It's a little bit of a hodgepodge because the quarantine hit. But I realized, I looked around, and I thought these were all really beautiful things, and I care very deeply about them. And if they all went away tomorrow, here's the great news, I would be okay. Yeah. I'm not the things I collect, which is why I guess the short answer... Well, you're not attached, is your point. You love buying beautiful things and you like the energy that it brings you, but you're not necessarily attached to them. I try. I work with that attachment. Okay. But of course I'm attached to the things I have. And I like really beautiful things. Mm-hmm. But I think what it's done is it's given me a consciousness that that over time has changed my relationships to the things I collect, because it's taught me that they are just things. And what it's about is how I put them together and how they've come together. And it's really a process of weaving the different stories of my own life into my own space, speaking personally. And then sometimes I get to do that for other clients. I get to get my ego and my point of view out of the way, and I get to channel what's important to them and help them tell their stories. Well, and I think that's a really good point. While people are at home, some people are working nonstop in Zoom calls. Some people are have unfortunately lost their jobs. Some people are dealing with the kids. Some people are binging on TV, whatever. But we're all living with the memories of things that we've collected or purchased in our homes. So your point is really to connect with those and learn to feel that energy more and create like a dialogue between the different pieces in your home. Yeah, that's a lot of those stories that I put up on Instagram last night. It's about that dialogue. It's about how things talk to each other through the lens that I'm looking through. And it does give me great joy. I guess also as I've collected over time, I only want to collect things that have deep meaning for me. Mm-hmm. And so I can look around my apartment and, in the background, there's a painting by Bo Joseph. There's a comma sculpture by Laura. These are very Bo Joseph. So I get to see them every day, even when I don't get to see them, and I have beautiful, boxes that my good friend Todd has given me over the years, and things that my sister's given me, artifacts that were on my grandmother's coffee table that were probably from the equivalent of like the drugstore that she picked up while she was getting her cigarettes or something. So what else can you show us? I interrupted you as you were showing us some. What do you want to see? What else you have? Everything. Show us everything. This is actually a sort of interesting thing that I picked up in Jodhpur in India, because I know you're sort of fascinated by that trip. And I am fascinated. A lot of us know about the miniature paintings that were done a long time ago. Over the ages, really popular 16th, 17th century. And I was able to hook up with the school that is still teaching people today how to paint those miniature paintings in the old-fashioned way, which is done. Some of these brushes have a single hair. So, and they were all done on old accounting paper. Oh, wow. So this is one that is, a lotus. Beautiful. This sky to me is just a really beautiful thing. This was done by the head of the school. It's a sort of diptych of a scene that I just really loved. You guys can see that.
What kind of paper is that?
Same thing. It's old accounting paper.
Oh, it's accounting paper. Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, but just when you get into some of the detail of this.
So what will you do with that? Will you frame that? Will you just how do you take care of that? Do you put it in like a Ziploc bag to like protect it? Or?
No, because I have a real aversion to plastic, which is a problem.
Okay.
I'm trying to conserve these
I respect
things.
that.
But it's me here in the apartment. There's nobody else. This is what I do. And this has also changed it's sort of about my relationship to collecting. These textiles are stacked on shelves behind me. And this is what I do. Sometimes I just pull them out and look at them, or I take a picture of them and just enjoy them.
So for some people, and that's another good point, actually. I mean, for me, inspiration, if I was lacking creativity or kind of down or whatever, I would go to a museum, or in New York, I would go to the Met or the Whitney and MoMA or whatever. Here in LA, I would go to LACMA or the Getty or whatever to get inspiration. But to your point, you can look at objects at home and really get inspiration from those to really bring back memories and creativity. So during your time in quarantine, have you come up with kind of new ideas for your business, and has your focus on your business shifted at all through this process?
I've never thought about, this is sort of true confessions. I've never thought about what I do as business in the first instance. But it is. I do have a business, I have a company, and I've done a lot of work over the years. Mm-hmm. But because it's such personal work, it doesn't feel like business. The way I've been thinking about it all lately, there are other things I want to do in my life. At the age of 48, I want to do more writing. I want to do more storytelling on a collaborative level, where it's putting images and words together with other people doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I can still do that in spaces when the fit is right with the client. But I've also been spending a lot of time, during this quarantine, I've been doing a lot of writing. I've even done a little bit of drawing. I will not show you that. But I think
maybe at another call. Maybe we'll do that later.
Yeah. I think the creative response is, for me, that's what it comes down to. That's what I want to do when I'm here alone and pulling my hair out. And, there's loneliness sometimes, and there's this feeling of isolation and this confusion of like, what's going to happen? And I have, friends of mine who know me, it's like a joke. I travel with like 7 notebooks, and each one has like a different thing going on. But I love them. I have them on different tables, and I go to this table and I do this, and I go over here and I do that. And I've gotten back to a lot of pen to paper instead of computer stuff, and learned that, so much of what I do as a designer, as a writer, as a collector relies on my internal resources and not what's available on the internet or through my phone. So I found the digital overload was really intense. It was suddenly everybody's available all the time. And
I know.
And now I do this thing where I sometimes don't check my email, or I don't go on Instagram or any of that stuff for a little while each day. And I'll sometimes just switch everything off for a couple of hours to just be quiet.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the interior design industry is changing or will change as a result of what we're going through right now?
People in the interior design industry have loved to ask this question for years before what we're dealing with now. And I think the answer to that is, as somebody once said to me, it's as clear as a fog. And I think that that's true for all of us. We're in a time where we have no idea what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And we never know is the truth behind that. We really, all we've got is today. We never know what's around the corner, but we pretend we do, or we fill our time with these things that give us this assurance that stuff will be there. So I don't know how the industry is going to change. And I don't think anybody really does, but it's all changing. And that's why I think the only thing I can do is just get really in touch with me, what's important to me, where I fall short, where I excel at certain things, the connections and the collaborations that I have, because whatever happens next, I believe that it's the strength of those relationships that is going to allow me to transition into whatever is next, that nimbleness, that flexibility, that adaptability. And
again, going back to being gentle and loving to yourself and letting yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us are our own worst critics. I can be harder, you know, I'm an extremely sensitive guy, and but I can be the hardest on myself.
Yeah.
And so the business, you know, it'll change. I think people's relationships to their spaces is changing a lot. And I'm hopeful that there will be a new appreciation for taking time, consideration, and care and creating those spaces, and the way a real professional can help you do that. Help you kind of tell your own story with your space, so to speak.
So we have some business owners on here. We have artists, collectors, interior designers, creatives. You know, some people are starting a new business or trying to grow their business while at home. What recommendations would you have for people like that they're trying to get their home-based business off the ground in this environment?
Well, I don't know. I've never been, I mean, my business, I sort of set it up, I guess almost 20 years ago now. And, you know, all I can say to that, I have no advice to give anybody. I can only say that my experience of being in business for 20 years is I achieved the most successful feeling when I follow what's true for me, when I follow what's in my heart. And that can mean if I have an interview with a client and I don't feel like it's a good fit, I need to remember to honor that. Because the temptation to say yes when you might mean no is huge. Because 100%. We all feel like, oh, I should take this. So-and-so says this is.
Yeah.
You know, my experience is that over time, what works best for me is to get a little bit quiet, check in with a very core group of people that know me and that trust me, and go with what my heart tells me. And that means that there's always a lot of risk involved because there is that fear of failure. And, you know, but I don't know anybody who has a really successful business who hasn't had to deal with that. So again, just kind of, you know, being in that moment, if it's something that you really love, finding new ways to solve old problems. And I guess the other big thing I would say is don't do it alone, because this is what friends are for. This is what mentors are for, role models, examples, people that you admire. I recently reached out when I came back from my trip as part of this new thing I want to do with more writing and pictures. You know, I started reaching out to people that stood out as examples and role models to me that I had worked with or had some interactions with. You know, one is, I've talked about him on my Instagram, George Lang, who took some pictures of me years ago for One Kings Lane. And, you know, I got back in touch with him and we're thinking of fun things to do. So don't be alone. I think that it's so easy to feel so alone right now. And even though we are physically alone, you know, this is a perfect example. There's so much connection out there that's available.
Well, we reconnected. You know, we've known each other a long time, but we really reconnected. And, you know, when you went on those travels and that journey last year, I mean, I've done the similar in different locations, but similar introspective journey the last few years in my travels too. And that really resonates with me with what you've gone through, and we share that in common. But talk about like ways that you're communicating with people. You're talking about, are you FaceTiming? Are you what are you Zooming? I'm not doing a lot of Zoom calls. I'm doing more FaceTime calls with people. And I like more individual calls instead of like these group chats of like 20, 30 people.
Yeah, the way I'm communicating mostly is probably text messages. But what I prefer, I like a phone call, like an old-fashioned phone call, voice to voice. I'm not a fan of the surprise FaceTime call, as somebody on this call probably knows from yesterday morning.
Okay. I might do that after this call. I might surprise FaceTime you after.
No, I mean, there is something about a phone call that I really like. But, you know, I've had like dinner with friends every now and then on Zoom. Text messaging has sort of slowed down. Email almost never these days, it feels like to me. I mean, I just don't have a lot of stuff going on in my life that requires email right now. But, you know, I think the important thing is to just communicate each day with somebody else, which I do. And there's a core group of people that I talk to.
Good advice.
Every day, if not every other day. So.
Talk about like your awards in historical preservation. I mean, this is something I didn't know about you until we talked about doing this call. So What was the award that you received, and what led you to that subject matter?
Well, let me try and keep it brief. So I set out when I was born. No, I won't go back that far.
When you were born in Houston, Texas. Yes.
You know, when I left college, I really set out to be a writer and a teacher. And then life happened, and I found myself in England, and I fell in love with design, and I fell in love with old houses. And I had studied the 18th century while I was at Kenyon, and sort of art and architecture and things like Alexander Pope and all of these things. And we were working at the time on a house, an old house, putting it back together. And my partner at the time and I interviewed some people, and I thought, this doesn't seem like something somebody else really needs to do. I could probably do this, because I grew up around a lot of design and architecture. So I started doing that, and then I went to school for landscape architecture. And then the next thing I knew, we had sort of restored this old house in Key West, Florida at the time, and it won an award. I did that for 3 houses, and 2 of them won a historical preservation award. Key West at the time, I don't know if it still is, was the largest landmarked area per capita in the United States. And there were these old houses. And then I started design, then people started asking me to help them. And, you know, interiors and gardens together, this synchronized indoor-outdoor environment, which is what I loved about the tropical spaces. And that goes back to some time I spent in Bali. And that was how my business started, really. I mean, then all of a sudden, it was sort of like, well, I guess I'm not going to be a writer right now, because I have a business helping people put houses and gardens together. And so those are the awards that I won. You know, I did an 18th century townhouse in London in a neighborhood called Spitalfields, which was an old silk weaver's house, 1724. It had been carved up into a sweatshop. Put it all back together with the Spitalfields Trust and the Georgian Society, like down to like, that's where I really learned in the field about detailing things like woodworking, joinery, flooring, material combinations, and how to work with artists living now to make things in an old way, even though they were new. So the old recipes from the 18th century, but done in a new way. Okay. And then in the same thing in Key West, it was an old captain's house in the old town in the Seaport District of Key West.
How fun. So that was 20 years, was that 20 years ago? Was that when you started?
No, and they were both actually published. If anybody's really interested, you can find them. The London house was in El Decor, and the Key West house was in House Beautiful. And the timeline, well, I can tell you pretty exactly. The London house was sort of 2000 to 2005, 6. It took a couple of years to get it ready, and then I lived in it a few years before I came back to the U.S. And Key West was 2006, 2007.
How did you get into selling French furniture?
Because I met a guy at the French flea market who told me that furniture could change my life.
And you listened.
I did listen. I got into it because I love that time period. I'm a real Francophile too. And
why do you think that is?
I don't know. My grandmother was of French descent, and, you know, she talked about it, and I, like everybody else, think that Paris is an amazing city, and it's always been a sort of a happy space for me. But I was there 1 year ago, or several years ago. I guess it was maybe about 7 years ago now, or yeah, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I was with my friend Sabine Rothman. We were walking through the Paris flea market, and I ran into this guy who was selling stuff, and I looked at it, and I went up to him, and I said, this is not Privé, and it's not Perignon, but it's very related, but I can't, and I have a pretty good lexicon of these things, so it was confusing to me. I didn't know what I was looking at. The piece behind me is actually one of these guys.
Can you pull it? Can we see it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that, here, let me actually do this. Hi, that's too close. There it is.
Too close and personal. I like it. Beautiful. And that's a Beau Joseph piece.
That's a Beau, yeah. Well, we can talk about this too. That's Beau.
Beau was on the call yesterday, you guys.
And then that's Laura. This is a painting Beau did called Deluge 5.
Beautiful. Love
and
it.
then this is my friend Laura Kaufman did Meters to the Center on Randall's Island, which was all about the distance of the center of the Earth to different points in the cosmos. And it was a very long number. Sorry, Laura, I don't remember what it was, but this is one of the commas that was sort of in the
What's
ground.
that made out of?
For it. It's made out of concrete.
Wow. Okay.
So,
cool. What else can we see? Anything else?
You want to see other things? Wait,
yeah,
okay.
whatever else you want to show us.
What else do I want to show you? I can show you a couple of things that were from the stories. Like, this is just, it kind of goes back to the things that we do here. I have these pictures of me as a little kid because I think it's always really important to remember your little kid before all the stuff happened. And then that's that hand drawing that I picked up in India. Cool. And then this is, word is a very important word. And this is just this is a box from my friend Curtis.
Everything's so organized.
Well, I maybe knew that this would happen.
Talk about that.
My grandfather had on his bedside table. And this is this amazing thing that Simone Joseph actually helped me to acquire by Louise Despont. Distribution of cement account, but it's sort of like a garden architectural plan done with these really beautiful colored pencils on ledger paper.
Beautiful.
Which goes back, that's the thing I love about the Indian miniatures. There's something about using these kind of everyday materials like ledger paper and accounting stuff and then you create on top of them. Mm-hmm. This I can also show you. This is my friend Laura Kaufman. It's a very long story, but this started out with words, and the spaces are the spaces between the words, which I think is called like the graphic river. And then she's embroidered all of this with metallic thread and Japanese pigment. So she thinks of this as a sculpture almost. It's like a bas-relief. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole series of drawings behind it that are the actual text. And this is, again, Beau Joseph, a bronze of his. And, again, nice. Personal items, a clock that my dear friend Todd Klein gave me, my two grandmothers and me, because they're really important to me. The Brazilian figa from my aunt. This table by Mike Diaz, who's an artist working in Mexico.
Ooh, I love the table. What's that made out of? Is that wood?
It's all wood. I think it's just a version of Mexican pine. He's represented by Blackman Cruz in LA, and this actually ended up here. Sometimes things happen by mistake. That was something I had in LA, and it ended up here. And here it is. It's not the right thing for there, and it never moved out before the quarantine, but maybe it'll stay.
Mm-hmm. Can you turn the volume down just a little bit on your phone?
Oh, yeah.
When the volume's up, it echoes slightly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit better. So what advice, well, let me take that back. How are you thinking of art differently now versus pre-corona? I know I asked you that in the beginning, but after our conversation, how would you recommend people dive into that process of thinking about art differently in their own lives?
You know what? I don't know that I have an answer for that, but there's something I wanted to read to you guys that was recently in the New York Times by George Saunders, the writer.
Okay. And
it's about writing, which I've been doing a lot of. And I think it's true for anybody.
Oh, slight delay.
And am I there? Because I had
to
just
you're here.
So this was in this interview that he did with Cheryl Strayed on the 3rd. And in a letter that he wrote to his writing graduate students, this is just an excerpt, but it's a great article. He said, it occurs to me that this is when the world needs our eyes and ears and minds. This has never happened before here. We are, and especially you are, the generation that is going to have to help us make sense of this and recover afterwards. What new forms might you invent to fictionalize an event like this, where all of the drama is happening in private? Are you keeping records of the emails and texts you're getting, the thoughts you're having, the way your hearts and minds are reacting to this strange new way of living? It is all important. 50 years from now, people the age you are now will not believe this ever happened, or will do this sort of eye roll we all do when someone tells us about something crazy that happened in 1960. What will convince that future kid is what you are able to write or create about this. And what you're able to write about it will depend on how much sharp attention you're paying now and what records you keep. Also, I think with how open you can keep your heart. That's a really moving thing to me. And I think
who wrote that again?
George Saunders.
George Saunders. That's beautiful.
It almost kind of makes me want to cry, because I think that that's all we have, guys. We have our eyes and our ears and our minds and our hearts and our hands. And what are we, it's that resourcing. We just have to dig in there and do whatever we can. For those who have to create, you have to put it out there. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's kind of how I think about it. And it can be something however small. I wrote a letter to myself the other day. Dear Malcolm, I wanted to give you a report from the 4th week of quarantine. I did it in this journal I keep.
I love that. That's a great idea. I'm going to do that.
You quickly.
Telling me. I love that.
Why not?
That's cool. That's very cool. That's something I haven't done is, I do write down, I keep a journal and I write occasionally. I don't do it every day, but write down my feelings and really expressing how I'm feeling and what I'm going through right now to memorialize that for a future is a really great suggestion.
Yeah, a client and friend of mine once told me, she said that a friend of hers had also, I've kept a journal since I was about 19 years old. And I go back and look sometimes, and it's amazing. I still think about the same stuff. The same stuff still drives me crazy. But I've developed a sense of kind of
acceptance.
Now I can kind of laugh about it.
You can accept it and realize that's who you are. And in some ways, you never change.
That's part of what quarantine or any kind of time of self-reflection can do. It brings you in closer touch with who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for giving us an opportunity to get to know you better and feel closer to you and what you're going through right now, and sharing stories and advice and inspirational suggestions for us. So thank you, Malcolm.
Well, again, thank you, Kipton. I just want to say, because I feel moved to say this, I'm so grateful again to be invited onto your series. I'm also so grateful that we get to have these conversations in a time where so many people don't. And I think that, and this is all I'll say, is, that more than anything is what I feel like there is almost an obligation to do what I can do with the best parts of myself, the creativity, the open-mindedness, tap as deeply as possible into the good qualities that we all have. Because the fact that we can be on Instagram and talk about making art and talk about what food we're eating during this time, we're immensely privileged. And I'm so grateful for that. And to all of the people out there, I don't know if there's anybody in that world on this call, but I think it's important to say it anyway, for all of those frontline people who are out there. And I 100%. Do believe in a way the artists and creators and designers are maybe the second line people, because we're the ones who are creating the stuff that will have been produced during this time to be collected later and to tell this story.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that and your beautiful spirit and your energy, and it's such an honor to know you and have you as a friend. So
likewise, Kipton.
Anyway, I will end this call and post it to my story so you guys can watch it again. And thank you for tuning in. Be safe, Malcolm.
Thanks, Kipton. You too.
I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.